Scottish National Investment Bank is Scotland's development bank, and it was set up to invest in businesses and communities right across the country. One of the fantastic examples of this, Mark, that I've seen is your investment alongside the National Wealth Fund in Ardersier, which was obviously the former fabrication yard for oil and gas platforms, and now is going to be Scotland's largest offshore wind deployment site.
It will be. For all the opportunity we have with regards to the energy transition, we actually don't have the capacity and capability within our infrastructure. Ardersier is a fantastic example where we'll be expanding our capability and capacity within the infrastructure of Scotland, which then enables us to anchor the other opportunities such as manufacturing, the fabrication of the floating turbines, and then the assembly of those floating turbines all in one location.
And that's so brilliant, because in terms of your missions, net zero is part of your mission, which brings in the offshore wind, but also benefiting the broader Scottish economy, bringing jobs to places that really could do with them, such as the Highlands. And another excellent example of the bank's investments on that front is XLCC down in Hunterston, which was a former, coal terminal, now set to manufacture the cables required for the offshore wind industry.
Yes. It's a fantastic example again, an area that is unfortunately one of the most deprived in Scotland. We'll be bringing jobs. Just as importantly, another mission is innovation. For us, again, to make the most of the opportunity ahead, we actually need to innovate. As it stands now, it's maybe too costly, or the technology doesn't exist, but the work of XLCC, of another investment we have in Verloom, is all about ensuring that we're innovative and making the most of the opportunity that lies ahead of us.
And I think that's the key, isn't it? In terms of, Scotland really reaping the benefits of the net zero transition for our economy, for our communities, our businesses. And that's where Scottish National Investment Bank, as a kind of anchor investor, is able to help these companies attract broader investment, right?
Very much so. We can take informed risk, but what that should do is then enable us to crowd in private capital. That informed risk is where maybe it's a little bit early for our investors to come in. We may be able to structure through debt or equity that we provide a facility or a structure that then enables them to be comfortable with the risk profile and the returns. We need the commercial returns as well. It needs to be commensurate with the risk that we are taking, but through that public-private partnership, then we can crowd in the necessary capital to deliver on or to support the missions and enable us to transition.
Well, listen, innovation, supporting communities, regenerating places all the way from the Highlands down to Ayrshire in Scotland. The Scottish National Investment Bank is doing a cracking job, and we are excited to follow a lot of your projects through with your patient capital and see what they deliver for Scotland. Now, one of the companies that the Scottish National Investment Bank is supporting is Aurora Energy Services, and I am here with Doug Duckett, the CEO. Doug, tell us about Aurora.
So Aurora is headquartered in Inverness. It's truly an energy transition business. We have done 6 acquisitions in 3 years. We have an international footprint, so we're not only a UK business, but we're in the US, Australia, Chile, and we straddle different energy end markets. 60% of our business comes from wind, 20% from oil and gas, and the balance from nuclear and hydro. So we truly span all of those end markets. We've invested heavily in a training centre in Inverness, which provides GWO, ECITB, and errata training. And obviously, where it's located geographically is front and centre for supporting ScotWind as it develops, and all of the other industries in that area.
And you're also actually involved with the Ardersier Port, the energy transition facility?
Yeah, so we've been involved in a lot of discussion with Haventus and with some of their potential inward investors from Asia in terms of resourcing. You know, obviously there's going to be a significant manpower requirement for things like hull assembly, turbine build and manufacture, and we've done actually quite a detailed study around how to support that and getting people into the area with the right skills. Obviously the transition of people from the oil and gas industry into those opportunities is key, and because we effectively have a foot in both camps, we really understand the skill sets that exist in oil and gas and what's required in renewables. So the discussions with Haventus have been very constructive in terms of, because there's some time ahead, you know, we're planning that workforce for 27, 28, 29 and further out. So it's our role in that is to look at how do we get the right skills with the right training into that location in time for these inward investors to actually deliver the products that they're bringing from elsewhere.
And that is an absolutely critical piece of the puzzle, isn't it, in terms of Scotland as a nation taking advantage of our abundant energy sources to really make the most of this transition for communities in the Highlands from the oil and gas sector as well as all over the country. How confident do you feel, or what's your sense of the way that workers are feeling about this transition? What can be done to better help support them make that transition?
Well, it's interesting. There is a level of anxiety in the oil and gas workforce. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity in terms of the scale of the investment. You know, something like 200 billion to be invested in Scotland over the next decade, 100 billion of that in the Highlands. You know, that level of investment has not occurred in this part of the world ever, really, and therefore the challenge in terms of bringing in the workforce and bringing them across the oil and gas is partly around that timing, but also about telling the story about why it's a real opportunity and why it's a positive thing. And obviously SNIB is a big catalyst in that, in terms of the businesses that it's backing, that are kind of front and centre in that transition, and we are obviously part of that. So.
A once-in-a-generation opportunity. Doug Duckett, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ports are more than just infrastructure. They're the beating heart of trade, industry, national development, and in short, national transformation. That's as true in the past as it is today. And a living example of the type of transformation I'm talking about is Ardersier Port, and I am here with Lewis Gillies, CEO of Haventus, who are the owners of Ardersier. Now, Lewis, give us a sense of the sheer importance of the transformation taking place at Ardersier.
Well, there's a lot going on at Ardersier at the moment. We acquired the site in 22 and we went through consenting in 23 and we began construction in 24 and we will be open for business in 25. That's a pretty impressive schedule if you think about it in terms of a major infrastructure project. And to put it into context, I mean, the scale of Ardersier is immense. People talk about big European ports that are available for deployment of offshore wind like Esbjerg or Cuxhaven in Germany. You could fit both of those sites onto the Ardersier site many, many times. So, the critical thing, or one of the many critical things when you're deploying offshore wind is, and it's counterintuitive, these offshore wind projects are very land hungry. And the thing that Ardersier has is a huge amount of land. It's got a gate to the road, but it's also very importantly got a gate to the sea. So it really enables Scotland and the UK to accelerate the deployment of offshore wind.
And it's a fascinating story, isn't it? Because in the 1970s, Ardersier was a key site for fabricating oil and gas platforms, and now you're seeing it as becoming Scotland's largest site for deploying and servicing offshore wind. But not only that, you're actually going beyond that into the broader value chain of renewables. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it, you know, for 3 decades, Ardersier was used with other sites to deploy the first generation of energy production from the North Sea. And then it sat dormant for 2 decades. And you know what we're now trying to do is bring that asset back to life and use it for the next generation of energy, offshore wind. So it's kind of super exciting, and one of the really fabulous things is we have the guys who worked there for those 3 decades come along on a regular basis, getting all excited about what we're doing. So, you know, we're essentially, in some respects, we're taking the site back to doing what it was doing, but for a whole different generation of technology, and you know that's effectively managing us through the energy transition. And what we're specifically doing, we've sort of broken the site into 2 areas. One we call Phase 1, which is under construction now. It'll open in the 4th quarter this year. That is entirely pointed at deploying fixed offshore wind. It's about just short of 1 kilometre of quay and 200 acres. And that will be available for the project developers, you know, from next year. The other part of the site, what we call Phase 2, is this, what I call the super exciting part of it. You know, what we're looking to do there is essentially enable floating offshore wind. Now, floating offshore wind is a nascent industry that's trying to get off the ground. I personally think it's got massive potential, both for Scotland and potentially as an export commodity for Scotland, like the oil and gas industry was. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to crystallise the industrialisation of floating offshore wind. And what in practice that means is, you know, we're basically trying to get to a place where the developers can come to our site, they can buy a floating base, they can buy a turbine, they can basically integrate it on land, and they can drop it straight into the water, ready to go, float it out and plug it in. It sounds very simple. To put it together is actually very complex, but the cost savings and the risk reduction that could be possible through that structuring are just enormous and could really accelerate the deployment of floating offshore wind. So we're super, super excited about it. We began work on the project in earnest at the beginning of this year. We submitted scoping for our consent. We hope to get it consented by early next year. In an ideal world, we take a final investment decision next year and be available for the first floating projects in 2028. So it's really, you know, what a different approach to floating offshore wind, trying to do something radically different to accelerate the deployment and reduce the cost and reduce the risks of doing it.
I mean, it is incredibly exciting, and a key partner for you in getting to this stage and beyond was the Scottish National Investment Bank. Can you tell us about the investment that they made with you, the criticality of their role in unlocking further finance?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we went out and raised private equity finance to acquire the facility and started the development work. And as the development work was ongoing, we were basically, there's a chicken and egg situation you've got to deal with here. The projects can't commit to you until they've got their contract for difference from the government, but of course they don't have that yet. So we had a big choice to make. Do we take a huge merchant risk in this facility? And we attracted this private equity on the basis of there's a port short to meet an energy short, which is, in energy terms, that's how you raise money into those type of shorts. But there's also a confidence leap here. And, that's why we opened up the conversation with the Scottish National Investment Bank and also the National Wealth Fund as a way of them basically crowding them in along with the private equity to give the private equity guys the confidence to move forward. And it worked. We took the financial investment decision last year and we're off and running, and we've essentially, we have an egg. We've put the egg before the chicken, and our objective is really clear. We would like to get £1 billion invested in that site, create 3,000 jobs by the end of the decade, and we'll consider that success.
Well, we're lucky to have you. Scotland's lucky to have you, frankly, because we cannot wait to see the site up and running. Lewis Gillies, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.